Josh Hennig here on 97.3 ESPN. Another crazy afternoon in the NFL, and it continues the saga in Dallas. Ezekiel Elliott, Jerry Jones. Jerry Jones said this morning that there's no deadline. They want Zeke for the playoffs. So to get some better insight into what Jerry Jones is thinking and what is going on with the Cowboys, the author of the book, How About Them Cowboys? Inside the Huddle with the Stars and Legends of America's Team, longtime NFL writers, covered the league since the 1980s. Gary Myers joins me on the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Gary, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Josh. How you doing?
I'm doing well. First, before we jump into the current news, great job with the book. I recommend it to anybody, whether you're a Cowboys fan or not, whether you like or dislike Jerry Jones. It's going to give people an insight into Jerry Jones and the history of the Cowboys that I don't think, frankly, they're going to find anywhere else. So, Gary, I want to give you a lot of kudos for this book.
Well, thanks a lot. It was really a lot of fun to write, and I've known Jerry since the day he bought the Cowboys. I was still working in Dallas at the time, and he gave me great access, which I really appreciated, and being able to tell the story of what really goes on behind the scenes and how the Cowboys have become this $5 billion enterprise. And
speaking of that, insight and behind the scenes, looking at all the things Jerry has said, like today saying there's no deadline with Zeke for the playoffs, recently saying, I have the right to joke with Zeke, period. It really seems like to me, between reading your book and what we're seeing from Jerry now, that he has really evolved as the owner and the proprietor of the Dallas Cowboys too. I don't know if we would have seen this Jerry Jones 15, 20 years ago. It really seems like he has really matured as an owner and as an executive.
I'm not sure that Roger Goodell a couple of years ago would have agreed with you when he was fighting him on his contract. But no, I think that's right. And first of all, when he said, Zeke who or whatever that comment was, and then later on said he thought he had earned the right to joke with him, I agree with him on that point, because nobody defended Zeke more than Jerry did a couple of years ago when he was fighting the suspension for violating the personal conduct policy. Jerry went, above and beyond what you would expect an owner to do, defending his player, and got into a huge fight with Roger Bell about it. As far as his outlook on Zeke's situation, it's definitely true that he needs him for the playoffs and needs to keep him fresh. But the first thing he has to do is get to the playoffs. And certainly he's got a better chance of getting there if he has Zeke Elliott for the entire season. We saw what happened a couple of years ago when Elliott missed those 6 games on suspension. I don't remember what the Cowboys' record was. Maybe it was 2-4 or something like that without him, and they missed the playoffs. So the games in September count just as much in the standings as the games in December. And I know that's a cliche, but it's really true. And you can't be giving away games at the beginning of the season because you're in a contract stalemate. All that being said, from what I've heard about where the offer is, that would make him the second highest paid back, ahead of Le'Veon Bell, but behind Todd Gurley. If those reports are accurate, Josh, that means there's not a lot of ground that has to be made up to get him equal with Todd Gurley. And it just really is an issue of, is Jerry going to stand his ground here? Is he going to cave in like he did in 1993 with Emmitt Smith, who had held out, and Jerry then signed them after the Cowboys started 0-2 and they went on to defend the Super Bowl championship? Is he going to take an 0-2 start by the Cowboys for Jerry to give Zeke what he wants? Or is he going to take a 3-0 start by the Cowboys for Zeke to realize, well, this team can win without me, and I still got a couple of years to go on my contract. I better get into camp or take the best offer that's on the table.
How much do you think Jerry also giving Jalen Smith that contract, how much of that was a sign also, not just to Zeke, but to Dak and Amari, that, hey, I'm willing to pay you guys, but you guys kind of have to work with me too? Because I think that what the biggest difference between now and the Emmitt situation was, we have a salary cap today that is way different financial dynamic than what was going on in the 90s.
Well, that's true, because everything is relative. Emmitt Smith wasn't getting, anywhere near the money that Zeke is going to get.
Sure.
And the cap wasn't anywhere near what it is now. But percentage-wise, I'd be interested once the Zeke deal comes in to compare the percentage of the cap versus what it was back when Emmitt signed. Listen, Zeke is as important to this offense, and maybe even more so than Emmitt was to the Cowboy teams in the early 90s, and simply because Troy Aikman was a better quarterback than Dak Prescott. And if Troy Aikman couldn't carry the load and the Cowboys started 0-2 without Emmitt, you have to figure that Dak, without Zeke, is going to have his problems also. In my mind, I think Dak is a long way from being considered an elite quarterback. Now, the weapons have improved around him, and they have a good rookie running back in Tony Pollard, who's looked pretty. He's been pretty productive in the preseason, but it all changes when the games start counting for real and they start game planning. So I'm not sure that Jerry should feel as comfortable as he sounds having Tony Pollard start the season as the opening day running back instead of Zeke, just because he's done well in the preseason. I still think there's a chance he'll get signed before the opener. I've seen these things happen. Lawrence Taylor signed the Wednesday before an opener. It's the deadline league, and the first deadline is the middle of next week to get him in time to practice for the opener against the Giants. If he misses that, then the following Tuesday, Wednesday of each week really becomes the deadline.
Gary Myers joining me on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline on 97.3 ESPN, author of the book, How About Them Cowboys? Inside the Huddle with the Stars and Legends of America's Team. In your interactions with Jerry, do you feel like that Jerry is at a point now in his life where he feels like, if you go back to the 90s when you were writing about guys like Jimmy Johnson and Jerry's relationship, and now without the Parcells and the Jimmy Johnsons, it seems like, though, he has learned from those guys, and he's learning to trust the people around him, like Stephen Jones, a la a few years ago when they picked Zach Miller instead of Johnny Manziel. Do you feel like a lot of the stuff that's going on right now with Jerry and handling the players has to do with basically the accumulation of everything that he's learned over the years?
Well, I mean, certainly he's become more educated in how to run a franchise than he was, back in the early years. But the other thing you have to remember now is Jerry is like 76 or so years old, and the Cowboys haven't been in the Super Bowl for over 20 years now. I mean, it's coming close to 25 years. And you would think that a stalemate over a contract with his best player, that where the gap doesn't appear to be astronomical, that he would really make it his number one priority to get this guy signed, because the Cowboys are going to be really good this year if they have their whole team. And, not having Zeke is definitely going to affect them. And this might be, the best chance Jerry has in the coming years to win a Super Bowl. And I'm just surprised what appears to be a minimal difference in what they're offering and what Zeke is asking has gone on this long. And Jerry just hasn't said, hey, the heck with it. Life's too short. Let's just get him in here and make our best run that we can for the Super Bowl. And I still, like I said before, Josh, I still think that there's a chance of that happening.
Gary, what about Jason Garrett? Whether Zeke starts the season with the team or not, how much of this season is riding on Garrett's future? Because he basically is, for all intents and purposes, a lame duck coming into this year. And you and I talked several months ago about, look, Jason Garrett, he was Jerry's guy, and this is the guy that Jerry wanted. And, we're several years into this, and Jason hasn't gotten them to a Super Bowl. They haven't really made any deep playoff runs. So, whether Zeke is here or not, how much of this season is riding on Jason Garrett's shoulders?
Well, a lot, as it is with any head coach in the league. Now, his future is the difference now because, like you said, he doesn't have a contract past this season. We know how fond Jerry is of Jason. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been the coach for this long. Without the results he's gotten have been, he's never won more than one playoff game in a season. So he's put the pressure on Jason. But I can tell you this: Jerry does not want to change coaches, and he's turned up the heat on Jason. The last time he did this, they responded and they won the NFC East. So it's possible that could happen again. I think he very much wants to sign him to an extension after this year, but he also at the same time wanted to send a message to him that, all right, I want you to be the head coach, but nothing in life is handed to you, and go out and earn it and go deep into the playoffs. So there's a lot of pressure on Jason to win this year, to keep his job, to get an extension, and certainly his situation would be helped if the owner would give him back his best player.
Gary, one more before I let you go, and I appreciate your time. Again, the book is How About Them Cowboys? Inside the Huddle with the Stars and Legends of America's Team. I mentioned Stephen Jones earlier. Can you explain to the audience a little bit about Stephen Jones's role on this team and the kind of impact on the team that he has on a daily basis? I think a lot of people, they see Jerry, but they're not as informed about Stephen's role in everything.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Stephen's influence in them taking Zach Martin over Johnny Manziel a few years ago. Stephen really learned a lot in the 4 years that he worked with Bill Parcells. And Bill taught him a lot about the business. And Bill had a lot of respect for Stephen. And Stephen's a really bright guy. I mean, he has an engineering degree. And he has learned the football business. And he's almost plays the bad cop to Jerry's good cop in a lot of these situations and contract negotiations where, the perception is that Jerry is often paid too much for some players, and Stevens tried to, rein him back in somewhat, reel him back in. I think his influence has only increased over the years, and when the time comes that either Jerry hands the team over to Steven, or Jerry passes away and Jerry says he'll be there until the day he dies, and I believe him, Steven will be the one that runs the franchise, and I think they'll be in good hands. I think that Steven has probably learned that it's beneficial to delegate football responsibilities, as they've done a lot of the last few years, to Will McClay, who runs their draft. Steven knows what he doesn't know. I'm not sure Jerry ever knew what he didn't know about football, and for too long was very stubborn in wanting to make all the football decisions, and only recently has relied more on Will McClay and then, certainly Steven. But he keeps a low profile outside of Dallas, Steven does, but he has a lot of influence in the organization.
Again, the book is How About Them Cowboys? Inside the Huddle with the Stars and Legends of America's Team. As I said at the beginning, folks, this is a book you want to read to really understand Jerry Jones, the inside history of the Cowboys, things you're not going to get anywhere else. And it's all because of Gary Myers, who's been my guest here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Gary, I really appreciate the time and the insight today.
No problem, Josh. Anytime.